Hello everybody and welcome to ASP.NET 2. This is the second in a series of 2 courses that focuses on this technology. And we will be ramping up what we learned in the first course and adding some significant features to it. I do want to begin by going directly to the syllabus and getting that piece of class out of the way. But as I begin with this video, I do also want to make a special note for our online students of which are a majority of the enrollment in this class, which is always kind of an ironic thing because I'm sitting here in a room with just 2 face-to-face students and they're like, wow, this is it? I'm like, well, no, we do have another 11 people that are online, so we actually have a section of 13 people, which is a pretty large section for this class. This is one of our courses that you get towards the tail end of your program, and I forget if it falls into 3rd semester or 4th semester. I think it's a 4th semester class, actually. Some of the concepts that we do in here are fairly advanced. However, it doesn't mean that they're not attainable. The approach that I use in this class is similar to the first class, which is kind of like a tutorial style. So we do a lot of walking through exercises that are already dictated to us. The point of it really is more to get you hands-on with the technology and using the stuff so you see how it works. And then where we're hoping synthesis happens with you is when you start working on your own projects or when you go out into the workplace and you understand how the tools work. Even though maybe perhaps we didn't build the most beautiful looking website with it, we did build something that worked, that, let's say for example, actually interacted with the database and could read and write data. And that's really kind of one of the big takeaways here. And the other real big takeaway, frankly, is the whole MVC architecture and then working with some of the advanced tools inside of Visual Studio. Jumping right to the syllabus, if you guys would be so kind just to open that up. I'll pull it up on my screen here. Now, as I do with all my classes, when I do these syllabi, frankly, sometimes I kind of rush through them and I see things that need to be updated after the fact. I thought I did a pretty good job of proofreading this one, but if you guys do catch any issues, please let me know and I will very quickly correct it and upload it back to Blackboard. I see one already, and it's just that the title of color is not consistent, is it? Okay, I guess that's not. Yeah, it's like a little darker shade of burgundy and then a brighter shade. I'll have to make sure I choose the correct gateway appropriate color because they have official colors they want us to use. So I will fix that. This is a course that we added to our degree program, I think at the beginning of 2017, if I remember correctly. The reason that we added this course is twice a year we have an IT advisory board meeting. And that's where Gateway solicits basically people from the community to give input to the things that we are teaching. So in other words, the employers that hire our students sit on our IT advisory board and they'll give us reports. These are the languages we're using, these are the kind of developers we need, we're having a shortfall in this or that, these are the technologies that are on the rise. And it was really clear about 5 years ago as we'd go to these meetings that ASP.NET and C# were on the rise. And the reason that was happening is people want to build applications that are more secure and easy to secure without necessarily having like a PhD in cybersecurity, and the fact that it's tightly integrated with all the other Microsoft technologies. And there's been kind of an uptick in a lot of the cloud-based services with Microsoft. And ASP.NET is Microsoft's scripting language for the web. It's also a platform for developing server-side code, and it integrates beautifully with SQL Server and a lot of database software. So just for that reason alone, there's a big demand. There's also been somewhat of a move in corporate America away from open source tools because of some of the security concerns once again. And also the finding that just because something is free isn't always necessarily an indicator that it's better. So, the technologies that you use to run Microsoft ASP.NET applications on a web server costs a whole lot more money than running it on a Linux server, at least in terms of like buying the software. But people that work in the industry will argue that it's cheaper to administer. So there's kind of like this balancing act. Regardless, people in the field are really demanding that students know this. We also saw from a lot of our sister colleges around the state that they had a really big demand. And in fact, if you were in the software developer program, without the web part of it, C# is a very important language. They actually have 3 different courses that focus on it now, including the Intro to Programming class, which is officially moved to C# as of this semester, which is kind of an interesting thing. So if you guys took that course in the past, you probably learned Visual Basic, and now they've switched it to C# for the very same reason. Not really a lot of functional differences between the 2 languages, frankly, except one is a C-style language with curly braces and semicolon, and the other one is, the Visual Basic oddity that it is. Visual Basic is kind of an anomalous language in terms of comparing it to any other. The only language I can really think that you can compare it to is Basic, and even there it doesn't really compare. However, a lot of the things that you may have learned in Visual Basic will transfer nicely over to the C#. A lot of the same, built-in methods and tools are there. And then, how friendly the Visual Studio environment is for developing this type of stuff. Okay, today is Monday, so this is the first Monday. So unfortunately, because it's on a Monday, we kind of lose a week. So we're only 14 weeks of class. I really don't see that as a big problem. I look at my roster of students and I feel pretty confident that all of them will do well. The reality is once you get to like a latter semester course, so you guys want to mark that on your calendars because everything will need to be done for this course by that date at midnight. I have 48 hours after that end date to post your final grades. And this is one of many sections I'm teaching this semester. I was kind of trying to do a count, and I think I have like 13 or 14 sections I'm teaching, which is pretty heavy. A lot of that is stacked, so this one kind of counts as 2, but I think of it as 1. You guys know where to be, obviously. You guys know how to get a hold of me. Probably the most notable thing, if you've had me in the past, is my phone number's changed, although most people tend not to call me, so which is fine by me. Office hours, if you're curious for coming in for extra help, it just so happens that I'm teaching Monday through Thursday night starting at 5:30 each night. So my plan is I'll be in the classroom from 4:30 to 5:30 every day in the week if I can. If I'm not in the classroom, I might be in the offices. There are some occasions where I'm not on campus, so that's why I always recommend that you kind of contact me in advance before you come in. I had one guy from my Java class that was coming in today for extra help, and then he realized that was at Racine and not Kenosha. And he was already driving in, and he's like, oh shoot, I didn't realize you were in Racine. Okay, I guess I'll meet you online. So I kind of got a little bit of a kick out of that. Not really that much of a stickler for like the beginning start times and stuff, but 2 hours of class time, frankly, goes really, really quick. So I appreciate that you guys are here on time. We'll probably end up using all that time real fully, especially as we kind of get rolling with the material.
We only go till 7:30.
Yeah.
It's 9:30.
Yeah, we only go to 7:30 because it's a blended class. Now, that being said, I don't have a class after this one. So if we have questions and we're rolling and we need another 15 or 20 minutes or whatever, I'm fine with it. I have no time pressure to be anywhere else after this. Now, if you ever need support and you can't come to campus, don't ever hesitate to do the screen share thing with me. It's really not that big a deal once you get used to how to do it.
Do you use Google Hangouts or Blackboard?
I've been using Blackboard Collaborate more often now, just simply because it's bundled into the course. And then a lot of times when I do it too, I find that the students like the fact that they can hit the record button and record it too. And it stores for them. I'm not always a fan of being recorded, but if you must, please. But here I am recording myself, right? So it's kind of a catch-22. All right, in terms of what you're going to learn in this class, this is a class that's actually currently undergoing curriculum development. So even though we do have an official course description and competencies, these are subject to change given the fact that our curriculum person here on campus or the state of Wisconsin comes in and tells us to change some language. But this is basically what the course is about. So we're going to ramp up all the things we learned in the first course, and then we're going to start focusing on the MVC architecture. And that's really kind of the huge takeaway here. Because that approach is so prevalent out in the field, it's really important for you guys to get your heads wrapped around it. Most of the stuff that you've done so far in application development has been pretty straightforward. In other words, even if you're doing server-side programming and you're using, let's say, either Node.js or PHP or something of that nature, or even ASP.NET, you're not really harnessing the full capability of it quite yet, because what you're doing is you might be taking portions of your page that are pre-rendered, like from a master page, and then you're injecting content. But you can take it up to a higher level than that. In other words, there's different aspects to it that are programmable. We didn't do a lot of programming on the back end of the .NET 1 course, simply because it didn't call for it. We were more learning the tools. But MVC allows us to do what we call separation of concerns, so that we are actually not separating just like visual components, but we are separating logical components. So for example, if you create an application that is data-driven, it makes a whole lot of sense to create aspects of your application that just handle the data. And we'll learn techniques, for example, that are like what we call code-first data structure. So in other words, we'll write code that actually creates a database. We don't have to manually create it, and that's kind of a weird kind of approach. We'll also work with stuff that connects to databases, but that connection to a data source becomes pivotal now compared to what we were doing in .NET 1, where we just brushed on it. Here it becomes kind of almost the whole driving force behind everything. C# is the back-end language. I don't anticipate Microsoft's going to move away from that anytime soon. And we're also going to learn about some other JavaScript libraries and APIs that are really commonly used within these architectures as well. You know, the attempt there is to kind of help plug some holes that we're finding in our material, so much so that some of the APIs that we're going to look at, like we're going to experiment a little bit with Angular, and actually we're going to be working with an older version of Angular in this course, but we're actually developing a whole course in Angular and a whole course in React, which we hope to have deployed by spring, which I think would be really exciting if you guys are interested in that. In terms of your book, it's the one listed there. It's not, you know, what I would call a formal textbook, which is kind of a benefit in a way, because first of all, the cover price on it's pretty affordable. Even if you buy it brand new off the shelf at Barnes & Noble, I don't think it's more than like $40 or $50. And if you're a smart shopper, you can get an e-version or whatever. The other thing that I will offer up to you, if I see that you do have an official copy, I'm glad to share a PDF copy of the book with you, because I have one. For me, you know, when it comes to ebook formats, that's really the best way to look at ebooks, because you really see what the book looks like as opposed to some like Kindle version which strips out graphics and whatnot. Now, some of the book we will use to do some of our work, but because it is not really a textbook, it puts us in the situation where there's no like exercises or case studies or solutions. I mean, they do provide sample code, but it's more a demonstration. And often I find with books like this, when they have code like that, that it's not always functional, which is very perturbing, right? So you buy a book and you think, oh, there's all this great code in here, I'm going to copy it and make it my own, and then you discover as you use it that, oh wow, this stuff doesn't work. So what I've done to kind of augment the class is Gateway has purchased a tutorial document that we share with our students in this course, and I still kind of have this like thing in the back of my head, and I don't know if I'll ever get to it with all the stuff I got going on, where I might write my own versions of the tutorials, maybe loosely based on the ones that are there, or maybe even go as far as creating a textbook for it, because for whatever reason, for as popular as this technology is, there's very few good textbooks. You know, if I look at like Java or like traditional language like C or C++, I can find tons of really good books, but then again, they've been taught for decades, so that kind of explains why. As far as the tools that you need, the same stuff you used in ASP.NET 1 should work. I don't know, for example, Javier, like what version of Visual Studio you guys used at Lakeview?
I think it was 2018.
2018? Okay, there is no such version, so maybe 2017?
Yeah, 2017.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
And unfortunately, you know, the versioning numbers, and I don't know if you guys have ever caught on to how the version numbers work for Visual Studio. Whenever they put out a new version of Visual Studio, it also coincides with the major release of a Windows consumer operating system. So when you see, for example, when Visual Studio 2012 came out, that was bundled with Windows 8. So it came out a little before Windows 8 came out. When 8.1 came out, it was Visual Studio 2013, etc. So when they came out with the 2015 version, that matched up with Windows 10, and so did 2017 and 2019. But you're probably thinking, but wait, we're still on Windows 10. But the reality is Windows 10 actually has major upgrades that happen to it, and they call them like the May release, the October release, the Creators release, and they really are completely different versions of Windows 10. And what Microsoft has as a strategy these days, if you haven't figured it out, they don't want to keep changing version numbers because they think it scares people away. And in a way, they're kind of right. But at the same time, always calling it Windows 10 confuses people. At least in the Macintosh world, they come up with clever little nicknames for everything. So we'll see what they do. So 2019 came out just at the beginning of summer. And Brenda, you took the .NET 1 with me class over summer, and we decided right at the beginning, heck, you know, let's just install 2019. So that's what I have installed on my machine. If you have 2015 or 2017 installed on your own personal machine, no problem. The school machines here probably are running 2017, and probably the professional or enterprise version, which is required by the software program. There are issues with how the things are installed. If the techs installed it per our specs, you guys will have no problems doing your work on that school machine sitting in front of you. If not, we may find ourselves having to put in a support ticket to correct it. So that's going to be one of the exploratory things that happens. This is my first day in this classroom trying to run that software, so if you guys go, I don't have that, then right away we'll know that we have to put a support ticket in. It doesn't mean that we can't do the stuff we need to do. The beauty is you can probably actually still install the tools. They'll just wipe every time you sit down at the machine, so that's just a thing. In terms of operating systems, really you need to be at Windows 7 or higher in order to run any of the versions of Visual Studio that we're talking about. I'm hoping you guys are all on Windows 10 by now, but I do get people that hold on to old Windows OSs for dear life because they just love them so much, frankly. Corporate America is kind of in the same boat. Gateway didn't officially switch to Windows 10 until about a year ago. Right, and that's you know, that's the exact same look I got on my face too. It's like, really? They would wait that long? But see, when you get something that works, right, and this is the discussion we had in the SharePoint class too, when you get something that works, you don't change. And Windows 7 was a very stable platform. A lot of people did not like Windows 8, so in a lot of environments they just skipped right over it. And now Windows 10 is starting to grow on people, but I know a lot of sysadmins that still don't like it. You know, so for whatever that's worth. We also will be using a bunch of different web browsers in the class. You know, most often we'll be coding towards Chrome and Firefox because that just tends to be what the marketplace is doing. However, we will talk about legacy browsers. We will talk about Microsoft Edge browser, which we might want to revisit pretty soon because they're going to be switching the code base for it. And frankly, I don't know if they've done it already. But they're going to change the core engine of it from whatever Microsoft did, and they're going to be using the Chromium code base, which is what drives Chrome as well. So it should be a kind of interesting. What that'll mean for us, which is fascinating, is we'll be able to use Chrome plugins in Microsoft Edge, which, you know, for a lot of us, that's, you know, kind of why we use Chrome, is because of all those plugins, you know, little ad blockers or whatever tools you like to add. In terms of the competencies, these are some of the things that we're going to play with here. So we're going to look at MVC, especially as it applies to ASP.NET. But I do want to tell you right off the bat, at MVC, is an approach to building an application, and you can use that approach in most languages. And some languages will have very specific tools for doing so. So for example, when we were teaching Ruby on Rails here, that whole class was MVC because Ruby on Rails is just designed to do MVC. And that's one of the first classes we offered here that taught it. But you can also do MVC programming in Java, in C#, and you name it, because it's more of an approach than a set of tools. We're going to learn C#, we're going to create some apps, we're going to learn about all the little subcomponents of MVC and how they work, and many of the ones that you see listed there, models, views, controllers, routes, helpers, all that, those are all aspects of any MVC application regardless of language. So that's the other value of this course, is that those skills are really transferable. The other thing that we're going to do is we are going to play around with Bootstrap a little bit in this class. It's not really a course that's designed to teach you Bootstrap in detail, but I don't know if you guys play with Visual Studio at all making web pages. Bootstrap is kind of like the default CSS template that comes with all the projects now, so it's kind of silly not to leverage it. The whole reason we use it is it makes things really easy to make a website look beautiful without a lot of effort. And for a lot of coders, that's a big thing. You know, what I hear from a lot of coders is like, I don't want to touch that front end stuff, I don't want to design anything, I just want to make the code work, right? And that's like a developer's perspective. And then you get the people that are more on the artsy side that are like, I don't want to touch any of that code, I just want to make it look good. And there's a thinking that, you know, the two can't meet, but the truth is, if you really want to be employable, you kind of do both, or at least have enough to help you. And Bootstrap is one of those tools that can allow you to make your stuff look really good without struggling too much. It's like you can probably just change a font or two, a couple of colors, throw in a couple of graphics, and you know, it looks good. And you know, the problem with an approach like that, of course, is everybody does it. So your website does end up looking like a lot of other people's, but you know what? It also looks good, and people are comfortable with the look. So like, yeah, this looks great. And you know, you just carry on with it. We're going to be playing with some other important technologies, Ajax and JSON, and you guys have probably heard of these technologies, but these are two really critical technologies these days in just about every approach that you use. Ajax is really a tool for pulling in live data to a page without refreshing the page. And then JSON is a technology that allows us to stream data in a new way. And it's become kind of like the de facto way to move data from various data sources into applications, which initially surprised me a little bit because the technology's been around for a while. But you know, like 10 years ago, we would try to do everything with XML. In fact, the X in Ajax stands for XML. And now we're kind of transitioning it all to JSON just simply because it's all JavaScript based, and JavaScript, instead of waning in popularity, is growing in popularity. In fact, I would argue it's becoming so important that might, if you only learn one language, that might be the one. You can do all your web development pretty much with JavaScript. And that's just kind of a little addendum. It's not the most efficient way to move data, but it's easily readable, which is why a lot of people like it. Some of the libraries that we'll play with, we will work with jQuery and Angular, like we said, but we may explore some others depending on the time we have available. So we'll see how that goes. We're also going to use an essential component of HTML5 called the Web API. And what the Web API does is it's bundled in a lot of tools into the HTML5 format that give us abilities to do things that we could not do in the past with HTML and the you know, associated technologies is a good way to say it. So it's very important. It allows for a lot of interactivity. It allows for WebSockets. It allows for localized databases, believe it or not, so you can actually drop databases on users' computers, and you know, it freaks people out a little bit, but that's what we do. We will examine some unit testing techniques, and those of you that have taken web programming 2 probably either loved or hated that part of that class, but that's actually a whole thing. People write code to test code before it's released. So that's kind of a weird way. So instead of like sitting the application down in front of a user to see if it works, they just write a piece of code to test the code. We're not going to go like super deep into that, but we will apply it to some of the things that we do. And then ultimately, we are going to be using databases in our application development. One thing that you guys might want to think about a little bit as you move forward, and this is probably resolved as of ASP.NET 1 if you took it here. Whenever you take the database class with Gateway, often you start installing SQL Server, and if you have that resident on your own system, that will take control of all the databases that you do in Visual Studio. If you don't have that product installed, Visual Studio has its own internal database product, which is SQL Server Express. It used to be a separate install, but now it's just bundled in. So when you do a code-first database like I was talking about, it's either going to propagate to SQL Server if it's already running, or it's going to push to the internal database, which is a light version. Is there a right and wrong? No, but you just need to be aware of that because it's going to be one or the other. All right, you guys know kind of how I do this. Show up, pay attention, stay awake, kind of those kind of things. Those are good. And knowing you both a little bit, I have no issues or no concerns really that I'll have any issues with that. Becomes a little bit more of an issue for online people because you guys, the online people don't have a face-to-face where they can sit there and look me in the face and try to tell me that my dog ate it or whatever the situation is. So the only connection that we really have is either by email or formally, like how I respond to your graded material. So in other words, like you turn in an assignment and maybe the feedback that you get from me is like about all the interaction you'll have. And frankly, for some students, that's enough. The only time I hear from them is if they have a problem, and that's okay. But I know sometimes people choose to be online not because they necessarily want to, it's just because, hey, this class is only offered at night on Wednesdays and I always work Wednesdays, except today is Monday. But you get the point, right? Or heck, I live in Arizona, I can't make it to class on Monday, I get those situations too. But for those of you that might have Monday nights occasionally free that are online, or you live in close enough proximity to campus, coming into class is always an option for you. You don't have to ask permission or anything. Just show up Monday nights between 5:30 and 7:30 in room T308, and that's for fall 2019 semester. And if you're confused about how to get here, just let me know. The other option is that you can use Blackboard Collaborate, which is this tool here. I'm going to bring it over from the other screen. That's listed right at the top of our course shell. And basically all you do is click through, and then there's a little button that says join the online room, and then you get this environment like this running in the tab. And right now it's basically blank because nobody's logged into it. But the reality is that that's a useful tool because you can actually sit in on the class live as it happens. And even though I'm one of those people that does tend to record everything or already has it pre-recorded, there's something different about having like a human connection in class. Like even if you got on screen with us once or came to class once, chances are that connection would be better forged. And that's why I always encourage people to do that. It is a little weird at first doing the stuff online, but there is kind of a workflow to it. And frankly, folks, as web people, out of all the other disciplines here taught at Gateway, we are most likely to work from afar than any other discipline here. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that, but you do have to do a lot of screen sharing technology and a lot of video conferencing when you work like that, and you got to get comfortable with it, and it's better to get comfortable with it in school than to wait to get on a job like I did. And it's like, hey, guess what? We're having a video hangout. And it's like, what? What the heck is a video hangout? And I was a little cold-cocked with it. But now I'm used to looking at myself on camera and going, Oh, anyhow, let's move on to the grading stuff. And my grading is pretty straight ahead. Those of you that have had me before know that I use a 100-point system for my classes. So there's 100 total points available during the semester. and every point on an assignment is equivalent to a percentage of your grade. I think it's a nice and straightforward system. Participation is 15%, matches up to the 15 weeks of instruction, even though we only have 14. We have, and see, I found my first typo. This should say tests or exams, so we got to fix that. So tests and exams, the midterm and the final are 15% of your grade, 5 points for the midterm, 10 points for the final. And then the rest of the assignments that we have will total 70% of your grade. You guys know that for a program course like this one, which is part of your degree, you do need to get up to that C level in order for it to count, and if you don't, you have to retake it. So 74 points is your target at a minimum, and then whenever I notice that somebody might be at risk of not reaching that, I try to reach out to them and see if there's something we can do to help get them there. We will have a midterm the week leading up to October 18th. October 18th is the midterm date, a little before the halfway point. And what I'll do with that is we won't have the exam in class. That's pretty typical for me. And I'll give you a 1-week time frame in which to finish it. All the exams are open note, open book, etc. And they are timed though. The only thing I always suggest to people is when you take an online exam, make sure you have a great internet connection, like it's not dropping. And never leave your screen idle for 5 minutes at a crack. Just even a simple mouse movement or touching the shift key or something will keep the session alive, because every once in a while I get people that look up questions in their book and it takes them a while, and then the test time's out, and then I get an email going, I was taking the test and it stopped, and oh my god, I'm going to fail, you know. If that does happen, you don't panic, because I'll just reset it. It's not a big deal. And taking the test, like the midterm test on time, is not as critical as you might think. It's only critical for midterm grading, which really doesn't affect your permanent record. As far as late work goes, these are my typical policies. Turn things in on time, do what you're supposed to do, make it all work, you got your points. It's kind of as simple as that, and chances are you get like a minimum of comments on it too. If it is late, you will get a point deduction, and if it ends up more than 2 weeks late, the best you're going to get is 50% of the points. So you don't want to get into that situation. What I do is kind of like a workaround for people when they are like pushing that boundary of being late, is I tell them, please submit your work in progress before the due date, and then I will give you another week to finish it without a late penalty, which I think is pretty generous. And I have a little caveat there that it's got to be at least half done, but that's kind of a judgment call. You know, what is half done, you know? Sometimes you can type pages and pages of code, but you're still not even close. And sometimes you can type just a little bit of code, and you're almost there. So it's very much a judgment call. I don't at any point turn any assignments off. You guys should know that too. Some instructors do that. You know, either like 1 or 2 weeks after something is due, or just right after the due date. They turn it off so you can't turn it in, and too bad you missed it. Oh well, better luck next time. I don't like that. I leave mine on through the whole course. But just remember, you know, if you're going back to really old assignments, you're only going to get half the points. But then again, points count, so may as well get them in. The only hard deadline I have is the last night of class, because I do need to get grades in too, so I need time to be able to calculate everything. I do have the Good Out of Homework free coupon, which I've discussed in all my other courses as well. This is just one opportunity for you to kind of negate one regular assignment to earn some points, especially as you get towards the end and you might be under a crunch. So I usually strategically have a number of little 2-point assignments that, like, in the last unit or two. So if you're getting all stressed out, you got a chance to skip an assignment and earn a couple of points. All you have to do is screenshot that, upload it in place of the assignment. It can only be used once though. Max of 2 points, even if it's a higher point value assignment. Hopefully you guys don't have any circumstances going on, but you know, life happens. That was kind of a day for me today. You know, I had a whole bunch of stuff going on that I didn't anticipate, and I was almost at the verge of not being here. So And you know that, and I try to never ever miss class. And in fact, the whole time I've been here at Gateway, I think I've taken 4 hours of sick time. You know, so it's kind of my working philosophy. However, we do understand that people have lives and difficulties and things happen. So if you get in a situation where you get close to getting everything done, but you can't quite finish, you talk to me and we'll make an arrangement. And it can work out pretty well. Yeah. So I think I talked about the grading policies already, so let's just kind of move on. These are all the key dates for the class. So we're here Mondays 5:30 to 7:30. We are a blended class, so that means 2 additional hours really should be online. And that's kind of on you on how you spend that time. What I would recommend is that you read, that you work on your homework, and that you come in prepared in class to get directly to coding. So initially, first few sessions, we will have some lecture-y stuff going on. But as we move on, we're going to get to the point where we're just basically just coding. And I love it. I prefer to do class that way, which means I just assume you guys are responsible enough to have watched the videos on your own time and you're ready to code. And sometimes you come to class and you'll already have coded everything, or you'll have coded and gotten stuck somewhere, and then watching the steps as we go through them, you'll find where you went wrong. It's a little bit more complicated when you build an MVC application, because all of a sudden you're kind of tracing little bits and pieces from all over different folders to try to sort out problems. But once you kind of get the workflow of the debugger in Visual Studio, I think you get comfortable with it. And I can show you some tips and strategies for that. So we start on the 9th, end on December 9th. Financial aid census date is next week, which means you guys just need to show up or log into Blackboard to clear that hurdle. If you opt to withdraw, you have until the 24th. And then I have a 1-week drop period that follows, where, you know, I really don't exercise that often, but if you didn't show, you're non-responsive, haven't logged into Blackboard, haven't done a stitch of homework, don't respond to my emails or phone calls, I will drop you. And I think the whole time I've been here at Gateway, I've done that once. And then I felt bad for doing it even, you know, believe it or not, because, you know, I just always wonder what's going on with the person when that happens. Midterm grade October 18th, and last date to withdraw November 18th. And I always say this for everybody: if you're at the point where you're towards the end of the course, you don't think you're going to be able to do well, don't take an F. Get smart and withdraw and take the W. It looks better in your transcript. All right, other things here. Typically, I would post a calendar in here today, but given the day that I had today, I didn't get to that point. So when I have it finalized, I will post it in Blackboard and then cross-post it back to the syllabus, just so you're aware. I'm hoping that'll actually happen within the next day or two. I'm still in the process of setting all the due dates for the assignments. If you're not aware, instructors do copy and paste their courses from one semester to the next. So you don't want to rebuild all your content or your exams and stuff, so we do that. But then when you do the paste, the dates don't follow. We have tools that allow us to adjust that. I've corrected dates for like the first few weeks. So if you're getting like late notices in your calendar for assignments, don't freak out. I will be correcting those dates soon. The way that I'll typically do things, and that's usually what the calendar shows, is whatever week we discuss a topic. So for example, this week we're going to talk about Chapter 1. We're actually going to do material tonight, which is good. And the material that will be due for Chapter 1 will be due next week. But it won't be due right before class or even the day of class. It will be due 2 days after. And that's my typical pattern for a class like this. The philosophy really is, if you're stuck, it's easier for you to come to class and ask me a question. Chances are somebody else has asked the same question, and we can answer it and move forward from there. There's no real reason to force you to adhere to a deadline and then send me like 10 emails to try to solve a problem. I'd rather do it face-to-face and give you a chance to fix it yourself. The rest of the sections here all pertain to information that's basically found in your Gateway Student Handbook. Although all the topic headers are brief, each one of those is actually a hot link that will take you directly to that section in the student handbook. And if you guys are in the habit of looking at documents like that, I would encourage you to. Actually, you should know what some of the policies are here on campus. Right. Last thing I always like to point out, you can read all this stuff yourself, I assume, are these last two links. The second last link, the support and disability services, simply refers to our tutoring programs here on campus. We do, on occasion, actually have people that are bona fide disabled in some sort of a way, whether it's cognitive or visual or hearing or physical or what have you. And the Learning Success Center at each major campus is equipped to help those people with their issues. But they're also equipped with tutors to help guide you through your work. So if you get challenged and need some extra help, and let's say our schedules don't meet up or whatever, you can go to one of the Learning Success Centers and meet with the IT tutors. All of them are either current or former students. They're all pretty razor sharp people and have taken the classes that you have taken. They know us as instructors, and often if they get stuck, they'll just contact us and say, hey, I was working on this with so-and-so, and we can't figure it out. What's going on? And so I think it's really cool, and it's not a shameful thing to do. In fact, for some students, it's been kind of make and break, and for some students, it also kind of turned around their whole academic career, is when you sit down with somebody that maybe has a different voice on the kind of stuff that you're doing that isn't your instructor, you're more relaxed about it, and just that different perspective makes all the difference. Finally, that last section, the Tech Connect, is a spot where if you're looking for an internship or a job, it's not a bad place to go. This is a site that's administered by the Wisconsin Technical College system, so it covers all 16 tech college districts across the state. And there's a lot of internships in there that don't get posted on other big job sites. The other thing I always like to tell my students too is that we often hear directly from employers as instructors, and me as department chair, I often get things filtered down from our dean and other levels of the college where a company will reach out saying, hey, we need so-and-so, and then I'll get a message saying, hey, you know, S.C. Johnson is looking for a whatever, and then we try to make connections for people. So I think that's a really good thing. The other thing I want to put out there, I mentioned the IT Advisory Board right at the beginning of this little talk, and we are having our fall IT Advisory Board meeting, I think, the first Wednesday of October, which I think is the 2nd. You'll have to check that on a calendar. I suppose I have a calendar right here. Yeah, that's Wednesday, October 2nd, and yep, IT Advisory Board. And now why that's important is if you have class that night with a different instructor, and I know at least one person here in the room with me does, we very likely might not meet that night, or we will meet in an abbreviated fashion because I'm required to go to this meeting as department chair. The other thing that's really cool about this meeting, because it is open to students, is first of all, there's free food, and it's usually pretty good. But the IT Advisory Board is really a collection of people coming in from industry to tell us as educators what they need from students. We have a very different mission than the universities in the area. The university's mission is to enrich people, charge them a fortune, and give them a 4-year degree, and good luck to the job. Gateway's mission is to find people employment, to give them skills that will give them that employment. So we listen directly to the employers in the area what they need. You can come to that meeting and hear it firsthand, exactly what's going on at these companies, what software they're using, what problems they're having, where they lack for personnel, where they have too much or whatever. And even one step further, if you're prepared with a resume and a handshake and dress up nice and a smile, I've had students get hired by the connections that they made at these things. Some of them with pretty respectful pay levels too. And the other thing that we've been doing, and I don't know if they do it at the fall one, I think it's the spring one, we do what we call a reverse job fair. So the fall one I think is just a regular IT meeting, but the spring one, which usually is like late February, early March, that one we set up a reverse job fair where the students set up booths to promote themselves, and the employers go around and meet you. And once again, when we did that last year for the first time, we had several people get hired. And we're talking hired before they're even done. So, and this is the whole reason why we're here. It makes us really happy when that happens, because we see our people succeed. But, you know, the other thing I always tell people is, you're going into this industry, these are the kind of conferences and things you need to be involved with, so you're in tune to what's happening out there. And it's the little connections that you make in life that sometimes lead to really big things, when you at least think about it. So when, you know, and I know that pretty much everybody that's taking this class is at that point already where they're looking for work or close. I would strongly encourage you guys to join that event if you can. I will put out details when we get closer, so just keep that in the back of your head. All right, that's it for the syllabus, folks. I'm going to wrap up this video, and if you could be so kind as to go into the discussion board and do an acknowledgement of the syllabus. Just create a little thread in there saying that I've received the syllabus, I understand, I will obey, I will pay my taxes, whatever, something like that. There's no points attached to it. At this point, I think all my third semester, fourth semester students, whatever you are, should kind of know the drill. And thank you very much for listening to this long-winded video.